First of all, I want to say to all of my University of Evansville family, thank you for this opportunity to speak at your fall conference. I believe it an honor and a privilege to be able to address those who are holding up a legacy of an institution that is continuously creating greatness and pouring into our future generations. I could give a testimony nonstop on how my education at the University of Evansville has really launched me into a world in which I was prepared to make a difference, grow as a leader, and to do those things that matter. I recognize the blessings that I received by matriculating at the University of Evansville. And if I can just take a few minutes today just to talk about what are some things that are going on in our nation today, or our current situation around race, diversity, and equity and inclusion in the United States. I believe at times this year, between the pandemic, the protests, the civil unrest, natural disasters, that this has literally at times brought our country to its knees. And I think what we see across the nation is probably reflective of what's happening in the Evansville community, on the campus, or in those communities where your students come from. And if I had to give you something to think about going forward, or if I had to give this a topic just real briefly, to me, I kind of go with, it's called Good Trouble Creates Growth. And that's really a tribute to the phrase of good trouble that comes from Congressman John Lewis. It's a lesson I hope we all can understand and that can be applicable to all of us. So I'll start my talk by just introducing something I learned over 20 years ago. That was the spirit of Ubuntu, or the Ubuntu ethic. And if you were in the Northern Atoll, which is in South Africa, and somebody greeted you, they would say Sawubona. And that's really the equivalent of hello in English. And the response would be Sakona, which means I am here. And there's really a Zulu folk saying that says, a person is a person because of other people. And we invoke each other's potential by our willingness to see the essence in that person. So when you see me and speak to me and value me, you bring me into existence. You let me know that I matter. And when I see the challenges that we're having as a nation today, I really believe, as complex as the world is, that what can we do to let the University of Evansville, your team, your staff, be an example and a beacon of hope that can be what is right, or be on the right side of history in terms of bringing people into existence. 2020 is going to be remembered for a lot of things that really disrupted our natural way of life in this nation. But 2020 has also been marked by a reckoning with the realities of systemic racism, especially after the unjust death of George Floyd, to watch the pain of a human being slowly dying right in front of us and calling out for his mother and saying he couldn't breathe. It probably stirred up something in your guts, because I know it did for me. And protests began demanding justice that spanned the globe, as demonstrations and unrest gave voice to the weight of racial disparities and injustice that has existed for generations in our nation. If you look at NASCAR and the NHL, the National Hockey League, and NFL, and corporate America, and our communities, and Black Lives Matters, and the celebration of Juneteenth, all of this has brought an awakening to our nation like many of us have never seen before. And many leaders begin to explore how to come off the sidelines and begin to address the racial injustice at a level that they have never done before. And I can tell you, never that I've seen in my lifetime. So now is the time to really pause and feel the pain that may be going on in our country, or feel the conversations that may be in your students' guts that they want to talk about. And I believe that this is where empathy is born, and also where solutions come out. And it's not a time to be sad. It's a time to think about what role we play as leaders in creating a better tomorrow. This has to become personal for all of us, because if it doesn't, we will never make progress. Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So for us to move past what we are experiencing as a nation and as an institution, and to only be sad, is a huge miss. For Dr. King also said, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. This is true now and more than ever than we have seen, as I said before, in my history. And when I think about what we can do in our roles and responsibility, I'm going to challenge us to get off of automatic and just listen to a few things that I will say about this. What happened in Georgia has been seen all over the world. What happened in Minneapolis has been seen in so many communities. So Dr. King also says that whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. In other words, there is no them, it's just us. So not being engaged, not wanting to be involved, saying that it's not our issue or it doesn't happen on our campus, that doesn't work anymore. We can no longer retreat into safe zones or titles or comfort zones anymore. It's time to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. So following is what I wrote to my soldiers and airmen and civilians in my organization when all this was going on, because I believe to whom much is given, much is required. And I said to them, as a former law enforcement veteran with over 25 years in the Reno Police Department, and as a Black man, I am filled with a variety of emotions stirred by the killing of George Floyd. And while I and many Americans struggle with these feelings, I encourage all of us to be constructive in our responses and not destructive. What we are witnessing is a defining moment in American history, and how we choose to react in the time of struggle will shape the future of our democracy. Yes, our nation is a symbol of greatness, but even that distinction comes with flaws. One of our most critical sins is systemic racism born from the sin of slavery. Now is not the time to be tone deaf, but to listen what this moment in history is saying to all of us. We can't define anyone's emotions or feelings in terms of what is going on. In our nation, it is time to be a force for good. In these chaotic times, we're reminded that democracies are not perfect. Our founding fathers alluded to America's imperfections in the opening sentence of the U.S. Constitution, "We the people of the United States," in order to form a more perfect union. This document afforded us many freedoms. Yet for some Americans, the promise of equality or equity seems like an ongoing battle. Yet today, we continue to fight for America's pledge of liberty and justice for all. And we must remember the right to free speech is in the Constitution, and protesting has been a part of this country since the Boston Massacre. So as members of the Nevada National Guard, we swear to defend the Constitution. We stand ready to protect life, property, and ensure peaceful protests under the First Amendment. We are expected to be role models of America's promise. We invoke the American spirit of hope, freedom, and courage, especially when we put on our uniform, the cloth of the United States military. Because we represent the values of this great nation, we are required to serve with integrity, not only in our words, but in our actions. And we must hold each other accountable when we witness injustice. As the Irish philosopher Edmund Burke said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So we must strive for unity. We are a country founded on individualism, but this is a moment requiring us to think more about the collective, we the people. As Americans, we must come together with our laws, with our philosophies and traditions to preserve through the turmoil and continue to form a more perfect union. We can no longer tolerate a United States that is not united. Whether it's members of law enforcement, the Nevada National Guard, our institutions, we must work together to do what is right. I believe that all Americans have a responsibility to lead the change that we desire in this country. The Bible tells us, to whom much is given, much is required. And as Americans, we have been afforded many great freedoms. Therefore, we are required, mandated to ensure that these freedoms are achievable for all citizens of this great country. I also believe that the connection through civil discourse will be key to our healings of our nation's wounds. And I challenge all of us to really listen to the voices of those who are pleading to be heard with open hearts and open minds. Also be willing to engage in courageous conversations to better understand the humanness in all of us. We all, military and civilian, have an obligation to be dispensers of hope, not hate, to uphold our name as the United States of America. I believe this same message applies to the University of Evansville, its staff, its mentors, its supporters, its leaders. Now, I know that race can be a minefield for so many. If we lean far to the right or if we lean far to the left, this would be so easy and it would make us all feel great. When everybody agrees on everything, it's easy, but that's not who we are. The truth is rarely found in the extremes. The truth is found in the messy middle. The messy middle is where leaders have to step off the sidelines and stay engaged with this work. So first we have to ask ourselves this question: where do I need to grow personally as it relates to diversity, inclusion, race, and equity? Leaders shape and define our culture. Therefore, we need to be more self-reflective on the skills and strengths and weaknesses that we bring to our organizations every single day. We have to do the hard work to diversify our perspective and our leadership about roles and responsibilities around race. Examine your own personal biases. Diversify from the people whom you are learning from. Our learning shapes our thinking, not solely on anti-racism, but also on leadership and culture and theology and strategy and whatever expertise you may say that you're called to do. Do all your teachers and mentors look like you? Diversify your relationships. Our relationships help shape our worldview. Reflect on how many of our relationships, personal and professional, are with people of different ethnic and cultural backgrounds. This is what I have told my leadership. Admit that racism is real, as hard as that is to say. Just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We have to acknowledge that it's real. We can't be a part of a solution to a problem that we don't acknowledge exists. This takes cultural humility. We all have biases and different perspectives, starting right here with me. Our experience, your experience, is not the same as everyone. As a nation, as a city, as an institution, we have made great progress, but we have more work to do. When you know something is a problem, you talk about it. COVID-19, we talk about it on the news every night. This is what it is. This is how we protect others from it. This is how we protect ourselves. When we talk about drugs, when we talk about educating our kids, we talk about it. We put it out front. We critical thinking, analytical thinking. Racism is a problem. We have to do the same thing. We get to talk about it with our friends and our families, with our students and our co-workers. This is how we get empathy to an understanding. It's not enough not to be a racist. Non-racist is not the goal. It means nothing. We must be anti-racist. Just like we're anti-child abuse, we are anti-sex abuse, we are anti-bullying. These things get us all worked up. When we carry the burdens of others, you cannot be silent. So when you shift from non-racist to anti-racist, you tend to discover there may be some things inside of us that we may have buried that we have never thought about. Is it hard to speak up when I see something wrong? This has to be erased. We will not get better as an organization, a community, an institution when we don't really execute and live and practice zero tolerance. Then we have to ask, how can I lead my organization to grow in the areas of diversity and inclusion and equity and race? For meaningful growth to occur in our organizations, you will need to come off the sidelines. Ideas that can help: engage in a diversity and inclusion and anti-racism training. Bring in Dr. Shelby and whoever you may deem qualified to start the conversations, to train your team, not as an event, but as a process. The work of D&I and anti-racism is exactly that, work. This is worth the investment. Lives matter. Listen to the lived experiences of those who are different from you, both on your staff and those you interact with. Create space where people can safely share their experiences without concerns for retribution. Create an opportunity where people can have an environment where they can speak up. Facilitate their sharing in a way that acknowledges that it might be traumatic, but it's okay to talk about it. As Stephen Covey said in the 7 Habits, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Remember, some of the most powerful moments in life happen outside of your relational comfort zone. Be a student first and save your criticism for later. The leadership journey towards anti-racism and racial equity is not quick, nor is it easy. You already know the statements and sentiments will not dismantle inequitable systems. So as leaders, do not choose to be the worst, or do not choose just to have the conversation. Choose to be a best practice in this. A good leader takes the challenge whenever and wherever it permits itself. Resist the temptation of what I call crisis fatigue. I'm tired of COVID. I'm tired of unrest. I'm tired of what's going on. And then some people want to rush to the sidelines and become too preoccupied to see what's going on, which means they've probably experienced a huge upheaval in their professional and personal lives. But imagine dealing with this your whole life. Don't be worried by what's going on. Engaging with issues of systemic racism, you may feel guilt, and it may be hard, but we have to move forward. This is the time. This is the year. This is the season. Be willing to get to that space where we develop and grow in those areas. So as I almost come to an end of my talk, there's 3 call to actions. I always give a call to action when I talk to my team about what can we do? What can I honestly do in my circle of influence? 1, make the University of Evansville truly an institution that elevates and works to truly end racism on our campus through our students and staff. Let's become anti-racist. Do this by starting a campaign of learning about the issues, giving out the right assignments that force us to think. Let's push ourselves to be better. Remember, even though the University of Evansville is a great institution, which I love, you are not immune to the forces of bias and prejudice, whether visible or invisible, conscious or unconscious. These things have no place in our great university and should not have a place in this great nation. Let's challenge our mental models and do a mental floss of our perception of how we view things of those who we don't know as well. Remember, diversity and inclusion is a strategic advantage to our students because it prepares them for a diverse world. This is no time for us to be spectators in this great nation. Number 2, let's make diversity and inclusion and equity non-negotiables, part of our strategic priority through structural reforms, funded the right way. In my role in the military, we call safety, unity, and integrity are non-negotiables. And it's something that we keep in front of us all the time. And it's a part of our strategy and how we do business every day. It's operationalized in our day-to-day work. So for the University of Evansville, I say, let's do that with diversity and inclusion and equity and race. Where do we need to improve? Where do you need better resources, positions, courses, policy, accountability, performance, evaluations, recruiting, retention, progress, and growth? Remember that there is a difference between progress and growth. We made progress in so many areas, but have we truly grown as a university in diversity and inclusion, area by area, department by department, program by program, and leader by leader? Let's change our lexicon as leaders. Let's focus on what's important now. What is this moment asking of you? Have the courage to ask that and answer that question. Let's disrupt mediocrity and the status quo. Disrupt the normalcy of your role at the University of Evansville and get to the stirring in your souls of how we can be a best practice and an institution that is relentless about having a culture that embraces all students, all employees, that sets a standard of fairness and equity and looks at the possibilities where we are looked at as the flagship organization for diversity and inclusion. And then number 3, one of the best articles I ever read was by Gordon Allport, his classic article on the theory of contact, in terms of how we contact people and status inequality and prejudice. And he talks about the importance of when we are in contact with people who are different than ourselves, when we get exposed, when we have experiences, it changes everything. And what it's really challenging us to do is to work on contacts outside of your comfort zone, create new experiences, make our contacts different, cause ourselves to stretch, create opportunities for our staff and students to grow. This is where we get to practice Sawamona, Sakona. I see you, you matter. Bring into existence those who don't look like you, talk like you, have different backgrounds, and don't go for the low-hanging fruit. Start off with racial differences. So to my University of Evansville family, past, present, and future, Sawabona, I see you, the worth of a soul. All of us matter. A person, no matter the race or creed or color or sex, is a person because of other people. We invoke each other's potential by our willingness to see the essence of a person. You cannot be the same, think the same, and act the same if you hope to be successful in a world that does not remain the same. The fierce urgency of now in creating good trouble in order for us to grow and become the greatest organization in the history of the University of Evansville. Every day you're writing in the chapters and the pages of the history and creating a legacy. I look forward to a time when we can all say, well done, thy good and faithful students, staff, and faculty. Thank you for this opportunity, and I just encourage you to be the best. Thank you.